All right, much love, y'all. Dealing with a fussy girl right now. She's trying to get herself in order. She don't really know what she want to do right now. But welcome to Thursday night's Women of the Womb Sister Circle. Sorry, just making sure we get the link out to a few more people. But welcome back to our Thursday night Women of the Womb Sister Circle. Aya is joining us this evening because, of course, we are talking about how she got here in her transition from being in the womb to coming earthside, right, Puddin? You gonna join us tonight? You gonna tell them? All right, we're gonna see if she'll talk to y'all this evening. But yes, welcome back. This is Inner Thought TV. Make sure you subscribe to our channel so that you can, get the notifications when we go live. You can stay in tune with all of our videos, all of the different projects we've got going on, our new moon, full moon meditations, and of course our Thursday night Women of the Womb Sister Circle, which we'll be doing at 9 o'clock Eastern Standard Time every Thursday. Hang on here. Yes. All right, ladies. And maybe gentlemen. I don't know. We may have some gentlemen joining in with us uh, as well. So hopefully so, because you all are an important part of the birthing process. All right. So for tonight, I wanted to talk a little bit about our personal birthing experience, dealing with a midwife, why we wanted to do a natural water birth. We're going to be talking a little bit about lotus birth and the importance of taking control of your own. She clearly doesn't want this of your own birthing experience. This partially was prompted from last week's discussion when I asked, what topic we should cover this week, and one of the ladies had expressed about how her experience in giving birth was somewhat traumatic, and how she didn't want for other women to experience that. So she really wanted for us, to have this discussion this week, which I thought was great because when I got pregnant and as I was learning and, researching, I had already, before getting pregnant, I already knew that when that day came, that's what I would want to do. So with that, I looked a lot into how to have a home birth, how to do it at home, what we would need to do, um, getting the tub, all of these different things. And I, I found out that it is actually technically illegal to do an unassisted home birth, meaning doing it at home, just me, whoever I wanted to be there, like, my partner or my mom, my doula, whomever, but doing it without the assistance of a like a midwife or a doctor. So that was originally what I wanted to do. I just wanted for us to do it. I didn't want to have the extra intervention. And so as I was researching that, technically, it's illegal to do so. So with that being said, we kind of explored our different options. And because this was, my first child, I was a little apprehensive about doing it solo, with no help or anything like that. So we decided to go with a midwife. And still do a home birth, but with a someone who is certified to do that. So we started looking into this. We started looking into midwives and how to do a home birth, and then I realized that our medical insurance wouldn't cover doing a home birth even with a midwife. So we would have had to pay out of pocket to do that, which was a few $1,000s that we did not have at the time. So that was kind of out of the question pretty much for us. So the next thing that we decided to do was do a midwife and possibly do it at a birthing center. Now here in Atlanta, I believe they recently built one. I'm not sure if it's or at least at the time it wasn't opened up. I'm not sure about now, but it wasn't opened up. They hadn't been doing any um, live births yet there at the facility, so that wasn't really an option for us. So, we wanted to do a midwife. We wanted to possibly do it at a birthing center, and I wanted to have a melanated midwife. Um, for personal reasons, I wanted to have someone that I felt that I could relate to, that could relate to me. Um, and I just felt more comfortable. Um, yeah, having someone that I felt that I could connect with. And that was a part of the difficulties that we had because there weren't very many. A lot of the ones that I looked up were predominantly, um, white facilities or white midwives. And it wasn't that I was against it, but like I said, I wanted to be in an environment and work with someone that I felt that I could connect with. So that was something that was very that was somewhat bothersome for me, because I'm like, wow, where is the representation for us? Where are the facilities for us? Why don't we have as much access to this as other women do? So that was a big thing for me going through our birthing process. So that's kind of a little bit of the backstory for us and the progression of how we ended up going. So the midwife I ended up working with, great staff. They are actually located in East Point, Atlanta. I'm not sure if any of you tuning in live in Atlanta, but I can definitely give you the information for it. But it was actually one of just maybe like two that I had found in terms of who would accept my health insurance, and that was close enough for us to have access to. Now with them, they, like I said, we didn't have the opportunity to do it in a birthing center, but they partnered with Atlanta Medical Center to there we go. Yes. Thank you. Okay. Sometimes you need that break. I can breathe. But yes, so what was I saying? They partnered with a hospital, Atlanta Medical Center here in Atlanta, and they pretty much opened up some of their rooms for the midwife company that I was going through to use some of their rooms to do water births, to do natural water births. Um, so I would be able to work with my midwife instead of working with the doctors that they had. But I would still have the opportunity to deal with their nurses and work with them during my stay in the hospital. But ultimately, we had the opportunity to have the type of birthing experience that we wanted. We had the opportunity to do a natural water birth. And so ultimately, I was happy with that. And yes, I know, the babies. But my reasoning for wanting to do it that way was because there was something that I just felt wasn't right with the way that they usually, um, in terms of doctors, dealing with doctors and OBGYNs. It was just something that I felt that wasn't right in terms of the experience and um, how they deliver babies. And my intuition and my feeling about that, first of all, I don't really care much for the doctor's office. I don't really care much at all for medications and things like that. I will say, I definitely give the medical industry their props. I broke my ankle a few years back, and I know that they can do some amazing things, but for the most part, I try to stay away unless absolutely necessary. So, with that being said, I started to do a lot of research um, into it. I started to do a lot of research, one, because I wanted to know what I would be experiencing when I gave birth. I wanted to know the ins and out. I wanted to know what I would do with the umbilical cord, how I needed to cut it, um, you know, what materials I needed to have. I wanted to know the ins and outs of the entire process. So I watched a lot of YouTube videos. Um, I watched some documentaries, and one of the best ones that I came across, which is actually still on Netflix. If you want to go watch it after this, I highly suggest that you do. But I watched a documentary called The Business of Being Born. And when I watched this video, it pretty much confirmed everything that I was already feeling, everything that I just knew wasn't right in terms of dealing with doctors, dealing with OBGYNs, dealing with all of their medications and stuff like that. And yes, I see the comment. I haven't met a gentle OBGYN. Yes. And that was the biggest thing for me because ultimately you have to realize that with the medical industry, it's a business. It's not about being it's not really about comforting. It's not really about trying to help you and assist you through that process, which is a very sensitive time. You're going through a lot emotionally, physically, and their job isn't to assist you in those things. Their job is to get a baby out and get on to the next thing, right? So with that being said, um, yeah, they are sometimes really mean. Yes, and I'll get kind of more into that later when I tell you the outcome of our birthing experience. But um, yeah, so going back to dealing with OBGYNs, first of all, they um, are pretty much trained surgeons. Their job, they like action because their job is to perform surgeries. That's what they really do. And with that being said, it makes a lot of sense as to why so many women get C-sections, why they're scheduling so many C-sections for women, because that's really what they know. That's really what they're trained to do. Like I said, they're not really trained to be there as emotional support or, the support that you need when you're giving birth. You have to understand that when you're there, they want that process to happen quickly. That's why a lot of times women will go and they'll say, "Oh yeah, I went to the hospital because I started feeling contractions, but they sent me home because I wasn't far enough dilated or whatever." Because the truth is, you can't stay in that room. They don't want you to stay there for an extended period of time. They need to flip those beds. They need to get the next. They need to get you out and get the next person in there, and that's how it works. Um, so Oh, sorry. I know there are some comments. I want to make sure I read them as they go. Okay. So yeah, that's pretty much how it works. Another thing that really kind of turned me off from it was the medications. Like I said, I don't even like taking over-the-counter medications. So with doing my research and watching the documentary that I mentioned, um, one of the most common things that you hear about obviously is an epidural, where pretty much numbs the feeling that you have to make it less painful, right? So the epidural is probably the most common one that most people hear of. The second most common is a drug that is called Pitocin. And that drug is pretty much a synthetic version of oxytocin, which our body naturally releases when we are giving birth. That is what creates the contractions, what allows, your uterus to open up to deliver the baby. So Pitocin is an artificial version of that, which is used to, induce contractions. It's used to pretty much speed up your labor. But what happens is when they give you these drugs, it makes your contractions a lot more painful. So when that happens, their next thing is to give you an epidural to start. I mean, not to start, but to stop the pain or to, make it a little more bearable. But once they give you an epidural actually slows down the birthing process. It slows it down mostly because you can't really feel it. You don't have any control over your muscles for real. You can't control if you're pushing or whatever because you can't really feel it. essentially numb. So that is slowing down the birthing process, right? So they're like, oh, okay, well, it's slowing down. Give them some more Pitocin so we can speed this up. It causes more pain. You need a more shot. You need a heavier dosage of the epidural. It's kind of like a big snowball effect of both of those drugs working against each other. And then ultimately, you end up in a position where they're like, okay, you're not moving fast enough. This baby's not coming. Give her a C-section. They're cutting you open, pulling the baby out of you. They're done, right? So that's kind of the end game, the end result when you go down that road. So that was another thing for me where I was just like, okay, nope, we're not doing it. We're not doing it. So that was that. Then the biggest thing for me that didn't make sense was the fact that they force you to give birth laying on your back. And that was the biggest thing where I was just like, that doesn't make sense at all. You don't poop laying on your back. You don't go to the bathroom and lay down and try to use the toilet. So, and even if you just think of the way that gravity works when you're standing, it makes a lot more sense to work with gravity, right? Because your baby is dropping down. It makes a lot more sense to give birth that way than laying on your back. Not only that, I remember watching a video, and it was a video, actually a few different videos that were midwives, certified midwives, who were explaining this. And the bone that's in your back, there's like a little tip. I can't remember the name of it, but you can look this up. You'll find the exact scientific information. But there's a bone, and the way it works is when you give birth and the baby's head comes out, it's supposed to open up like a little flap. It's supposed to go back. But if you're laying on your back, it prevents that bone from opening up the way it should. So your baby's head isn't really able to flow smoothly out as it should, right? So that is another thing that causes tearing. Um, you know, oh, I'm sorry. Let me read the comments. Elise Taylor says, that's so scary, putting your body through so much. Then females wonder why they go through so much after childbirth. Exactly. Like I said, especially giving birth like that, why there's so much tearing, why they got to get stitches, why, they're laying in the bed for days. It's crazy, but let me keep going. Ava Gregg, you just described my experience, so many women's experience. And no other country gives birth like that, even in hospitals. Yes, the U.S. has made healthcare a business. I definitely want to get into that in terms of the U.S. compared to other countries. Gaia Johnson says, like most animals, we need to be moving around. They are causing us more pain by laying down. Exactly. So kind of to comment on no other country gives birth like that. I also want to mention the fact that the U.S. I believe has like the second worst the second worst number for the amount of women and the amount of children, of babies who die during childbirth, mostly because of this. Also because of the fact that midwives are not really allowed in the birthing experience anymore. Well, at least in this country, I think the statistic was like 1% now. Since 2005, the number has been consistent, but it's about 1% of midwives who deliver babies in the US compared to about 70-80% of midwives who deliver babies in other countries like Europe, Japan, pretty much every other country besides the United States. So, because like I said, with OBGYNs, not only are they pretty much trained for surgery, but it makes more money. If they got to cut you open, it makes more money because then the anesthesiologist gets paid, they're getting paid. It's so much that goes into it. You're paying for all the different drugs they got to give you. It's crazy how much money goes into this whole the whole business of being born, which is pretty much what that documentary is about. So I'm going to say that again for those of you who are just now tuning in. If you get the chance, it is on Netflix, The Business of Being Born. It is a great documentary to watch. I'm pretty sure they also sell the DVD if you don't have Netflix or if you want to get it to own, but it's on there for you to go and look at. I highly suggest that that you watch it. Going back to the other comment, like most animals, we need to be moving around. They are causing us more pain by laying down. Yes, absolutely. Um, it's like with anything else. When you stretch, when you move, you can deal more, you can channel that pain a lot better than if you're just laying down. Um, so, with that being said, I do kind of want to jump back to our birthing experience because I did mention that we wanted to do a natural water birth. So, we were set to do it. We had gone to the class. I think I had about 2 more months to go. We went to the class at my midwife's office. We got to see the tub, we got to sit in it, we got to kind of try out some different seating positions, all of these things. So we were ready to go. We were super excited. Now, my daughter actually ended up coming early. My water broke 8 weeks early, and because that was considered high risk, I called my midwife and she said, okay, yep, this baby is coming and we're not going to be able to do the water birth. So you're going to have to deliver with the doctor at the hospital. And I was probably a little more devastated about the fact that I would have to deal with the doctor as opposed to being able to deal with my midwife because of the things that I already knew that I had learned. But because I knew these things, because I had researched, I had in my mind when I got there, when I was going to deal with this doctor, I already knew what I wanted. I knew I wasn't going to let them talk me into something that I didn't want. Um, and I knew that, just pretty much how to stand my ground, the things that I was going to ask for and that I wasn't going to budge on. The other thing that we weren't able to do was the lotus birth, which I will discuss next for those of you who don't know what that is and also why that is important. And we weren't able to do that. So that was another reason why I was saddened, by the fact that I would have to work with the doctor because I knew that they were not going to allow me to do the lotus birth. But with that being said, we had to deal with the doctors. Now, before I say this, I do appreciate all of the work that they did. My daughter stayed in the NICU for probably about 3.5 weeks, even though there were some things that I was definitely against. I can say that my daughter, she was healthy. She made it home, and then we were able to implement the things that we wanted. So I definitely will give them their props because I did get familiar with a lot of the nurses who worked in there. So it wasn't all bad, but yeah. So my daughter, my water broke 8 weeks early. My daughter came early. She was 8 weeks early. So when we first arrived at the hospital, they they let me know they were going to run some tests and things like that just to see what the cause may have been for for my water breaking so early. And then they also let me know that they were going to hook me up to the IV to keep fluids flowing, and they wanted me to stay there pretty much for as long as possible to see if I could hold out a little while longer before she came, obviously, so that she could continue to develop a little bit more. So we were there about 3 days before she came, before she was delivered, and they had me hooked up to these monitors so that they can monitor her heart rate and some other things. And I did not like it. I hated that feeling of being strapped. I hated that IV being in my arm. And it was just all the things that I had wanted to avoid pretty much. I had to experience them. So when the time came for her to actually be born, when I started to go into labor, I could feel my contractions, but for whatever reason, they weren't popping up on the monitor. So the nurses couldn't see them. So I kept telling them, like, I have contractions, I feel them, and they kept saying, well, it's not popping up, so we're just gonna wait, you just lay here, just lay here. They wanted me to lay down, they wanted me to just lay there pretty much the entire time I was there, because they were like, we don't want this baby to come, so you need to lay down, you need to stay put. So as I was feeling the contractions, I knew I was going into labor. And I kept saying, like, I can't just lay here. It doesn't make sense for me to lay here because I feel my body changing. I feel this baby coming. So they ended up bringing me a like one of the bedside toilets, because I had to keep getting up to use the bathroom, because the IV and all the fluids that were flowing through me, I had to keep using the bathroom. So they brought this the bedside toilet for me. So every time our nurse would leave the room, I would get up and I would squat, because I could feel the baby moving, and it was the only thing that made it more bearable, because laying there, just like we had mentioned, it was painful. So getting up and moving and being able to squat helped a lot. And so I think, after maybe the third or fourth time um, of doing this, the nurse finally caught me. So she came in and she was like, oh, what are you doing? No, you're not supposed to do that. You need to get back in the bed, because we want to make sure that this baby stays in there as long as possible. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, you keep saying that, but I'm obviously in labor, so it doesn't make sense for us to keep trying to prevent what's already happening. So, I end up, after a few hours, I get back in the bed, and I was so exhausted by this point. Um, so I did end up asking for them to give me something just to help me go to sleep. I didn't take the epidural, I didn't take the Pitocin. I can't remember, what it was that they gave me, but I asked them because I was so exhausted. I just wanted to sleep. So by the time I woke back up, I was probably about 8 centimeters dilated. And um, I was like, okay, the baby is coming soon. So the last 30 minutes, um, I wanted to, I wanted to turn around and kind of like squat on my knees, like while I was in the bed. And the nurses didn't want me to do that. They kept saying, no, we don't want you to do that. So luckily, one of the midwives from the office that I had worked with, it wasn't my midwife, but it was one of the midwives who worked there that I had actually done one of my prenatal visits with, happened to be doing a shift at the hospital that night. So she came in to check on me, and she said, hey, the other midwife, the one that I was working with, she says, hey, she let me know you were here. She wanted me to come check on you. And that was like my saving grace, because when she saw me there, she was like, do you want to turn over? Do you want to, like kind of squat on your knees? It might be helpful. And I was like, yes, please. And she was the only person that asked me if I wanted to do that, and that allowed me to do that. If it wasn't for her being there, those nurses pretty much were going to force me to have my child laying on my back, even though I kept saying, this is not working for me, right? Exactly. The spirits were right by my side, and I'm grateful for that, because they were not trying to hear what I was saying. They kept trying to tell me to lay down and stop this baby from coming, who was obviously ready to be born. Um, so, long story short, baby comes, great. She's delivered. Um, but like I said, it was difficult for me because what we wanted to do, um, we weren't able to. And the biggest thing to that I wanted to do during childbirth was a lotus birth. And what that is, I'm sorry, I want to go back because I know I skipped a comment. Ava Greg says, and we are brainwashed to believe we have the best doctors and hospitals in the world, deterring us from going to other countries to find more affordable holistic options. Yes. because anytime I mention holistic whatever, these people look at me like I am crazy. They try to give me everything in the book to pretty much make me feel like, I'm neglecting my child, or I'm abusing her, or whatever. But they'll look at you like you're crazy if you say anything about holistic or doing it the natural way. But I'll get more into that in just a second. So one of the biggest things that I was disappointed about was not being able to do the lotus birth. And sorry, I had to plug this computer back in. And what a lotus birth is, that is pretty much when the baby is born, allowing the placenta to stay attached and allowing it to naturally fall off. So even with dealing with my midwife, before we got to the hospital, she actually didn't know anything about lotus birth. When I brought it up to her, when we brought it up to her, and she was like, "Oh yeah, I think I've heard of that, but I've never done one before. I don't know how to do it." At least she was open to doing it. She just said, type me up some instructions, let me know what I need to do, what you need from me, and we'll do it. We'll go for it. And there were probably about 6 or 7 other women who she was working with who also wanted to do a lotus birth. And while we were at the water birth coaching class, she asked me to get up and explain, what that meant and what the importance of it is. So, what most people don't know, first of all, your child is attached to the placenta the entire time they're in the womb. That's their lifeline. It's what's pumping blood, what's pumping all the different nutrients, minerals to their body. It's what's sustaining them ultimately while they're in the womb. So when a baby is born, typically the doctors will immediately cut it. Once the baby comes out, they'll cut it. And then allow the placenta to be birthed afterwards. But what that does, there's actually about 25%, I believe 25% of the rest of the blood that the baby needs, the rest of the nutrients and oxygen and things like that that the baby needs, that is still pulsating through the umbilical cord once the baby is born. So if you were to cut that prematurely, things like iron, all these different things that a baby needs, once you cut that prematurely, you're not allowing them to get everything that they need once they're born. That's a big transition for them. So you kind of have to give them time. And doctors will immediately cut that. There's also necessary stem cells that is still pulsing through that umbilical cord once the baby is born. So it's not a good idea. It's not a good idea to have that cut as soon as the baby is delivered. Now, I don't want to sound like the cynical person, but I mean, you can look it up, real cases of them taking stem cells from other people. Henrietta Lacks, if you've never heard of her, look her up. But harvesting stem cells, and that is one of the biggest things that they do, especially with melanated children, when they're cutting the baby's umbilical cord, when they're taking the placenta. You got to ask yourself, what are they doing with that? There are very valuable things that they are taking the placenta and using it for that you have no idea about. So for us, we wanted to do a lotus birth, which for some people, you're kind of like, okay, that's too much. I don't want to keep it attached. So for that, I would recommend at least doing delayed cord clamping, which most doctors would be they would be okay with, which is pretty much waiting for a longer period of time before cutting the umbilical cord, which is a lot better than immediately cutting it anyway. But for us, we wanted to do the lotus birth, not only for the medical reasons, like I said, of blood that's still being transferred, oxygen, iron, all those different things, but for spiritual reasons as well. Another thing that most people don't realize is that your child shares a womb with the placenta. So they also have a shared energetic field, a shared aura, so to say, with the placenta. So when you're cutting that connection, not only that, but the placenta, if you look it up, it's called, they call it the little mother, because it's what sustains the baby while it's in the womb. So to have that big transition from being in the womb, being in the waters, being inside of darkness, and coming out into the world, all the lights, all these people, all these voices, all of these things that are so foreign to a baby, it is almost like a traumatic experience for them. Um, so you don't want to add unnecessary stress. So for us, that's why we wanted to allow it um, to naturally fall off. That's why we wanted to do a natural water birth, period, because we wanted to make the transition from being in the womb to coming earthside as easy as possible, as meditative as possible, as gentle as possible. And when you're doing that, when you're giving birth in a hospital, it's pretty much the total opposite of that. It's quick, it's fast. There's 10 different people in your room. There's, like I said, all of the lights, all of the sounds. It can be very chaotic, and we wanted to avoid those things. Um, we wanted to make it, as like I said, as natural as possible. So with the lotus birth, we did a lot of research on that as well, how to do it, how to preserve it. And basically, once you do a lotus birth, you obviously have to wash the placenta very well. You have to clear off all the blood, and then you would put it in, they have different types. You can purchase um, the the bags that you can put it in. They have now started to make one specifically for that, or you can look up the different type of cloths to use. But basically, you use different herbs, flowers, to pink Himalayan salt, to help it to naturally dry out, that you would cover the placenta with, wrap it up pretty nice. And not only for the spiritual benefits of that, not only for the physical benefits of that, but also because it allows for you to have intimate time with your child, rather than everybody coming to see the baby and wanting to hold the baby, and everybody wanting to be in the baby's face. It's a very sacred time. And so by doing a lotus birth, that also helps to preserve that. So there aren't a lot of people who know anything about doing a lotus birth or know where to start, but I definitely suggest for other moms, for that to be something that you look into. Even though we weren't able to do it, we weren't able to have the full experience, it's still something that I'm very passionate about, that I still advocate for, and that I would love to see more moms be able to do. Um, Really quick, for those of you who are watching, use the live chat, pull up the live chat if you have any comments or any questions, or if you want to share a little bit about your birthing experience, for those of you who have gone through this. And let me know if anything that I've said resonates with you, if it makes sense. um, if I'm speaking truth about any of your experiences, because I definitely want to know. Um, I, like I said, I know there were a lot of women that I had spoken to, even as we were going through our process, who kind of confirmed for me why my feeling was right. They were like, well, this was my experience. This was my experience working with a doctor and having my baby in the hospital, and this is why I will never do it again. You know, and so for us, it wasn't super traumatic. It wasn't horrible having our child in the hospital, but it was it it did open my eyes to what other women's experiences have been, and what it could have been if we didn't know all the things that we had researched. If we didn't know about, kind of standing our ground and saying, no, we're not going to do this, we're not going to do that. Don Kufi says, I missed what a lotus birth is. Can you reiterate that, please? Yes, a lotus birth is when you do not cut the umbilical cord, when you allow for it to um, detach naturally. And with that, a lot of people are like, well, how long does it take? But for the most part, a lot of times, it may take between, it may take 3 days, it may take 7 days, it kind of depends, but you allow for it to naturally detach. And I was saying that even if you don't want to go all the way with a lotus birth, because it is a lot to commit to, even if you don't want to go all the way, you definitely should let your doctor know if you do choose to go through a doctor, or if you are in a situation like us where we were considered high risk and we had to deal with the doctor ultimately, to let them know, yes, it is still connected to the placenta. Yes, it's connected to the baby and it's connected to the placenta. But also, let them know that you want to do delayed cord clamping, because there are still nutrients, there's still blood, there's still oxygen, iron, all of these things that are being pumped through the umbilical cord from the placenta to the baby once the baby is delivered. So it is important to not immediately cut the umbilical cord, which is a common practice now. It is important to not do that, because your child still needs that once they're born. They still need that blood flow, that blood supply from the placenta. Um, yes, and then of course all the other things that I mentioned about, you know just what that process is and how it allows the child to have a more gentle transition, and kind of keeps other people away from your child. We're so used to doing things in an unnatural way here in America, especially, that when you kind of talk about natural practices, people look at you like you're crazy. I mean, truthfully, in other countries, um, they don't take their babies out for the first 2, 3 months, to go shopping or to go do whatever. They don't take their babies out to go do that, because they understand the importance of, or they understand the significance of their child and what really just occurred. I don't think people really, um, I don't think that they really pay attention to the spiritual significance of giving birth to a person, of giving birth to a whole nother human being. It's kind of like, oh yeah, I had a baby, whatever, and they're often on and popping onto the next thing. But I mean, I don't know. For me, just learning about how a baby develops in the womb, how they grow, how they go from the tiniest cell, in the body into a full human being. If that is not a divine process to you, I don't know. To me, it blows my mind, and it just lets you, it lets you realize the, um I don't know, the higher power, whatever you want to call it, the universe, God. But to me, it lets me know that that is a real thing, that our bodies are capable of doing that. And so many people don't see it that way. It's just such a, like, whatever thing, like, oh yeah, we had a baby, I got pregnant, whoop de doo. I don't know. But that's my opinion. I'm sorry, I got way off on a tangent. But have you and the fallback up ever heard of orgasmic birth? When I saw that video, I was like, yippee, yes. I have heard of that. I have, but yes, for those of you who don't know what that is, definitely look up and look into it. Look on YouTube. You can find all of these different things. Parents are also given time off to connect with the baby. Yes, you're given time off to connect with the baby. That is what you're supposed to do. America also has worst um, one of the worst practices for maternity and paternity leave. In other countries, they allow both the mother and the father to take off to tend to their baby, with the guarantee that they will come back to their job that they left, and not just for 2 weeks, not just for 3 weeks, but for extended periods of time. I mean, it's crazy that the experience we have here is so different. But for me, I remember the first time, and it was definitely some months later. I had gone to work, like a private event, a party for like a contracting company that I worked for from time to time, And the entire time I was there, I was like, I need to get home to my baby. You know, I felt this huge, um, what's the word? It was just like, uh, detachment, you know, and that was a big thing for me. And I know just from being in like different, you know, like mommy groups and stuff like that, that a lot of women have a hard time with being separated from their child, because there's no way to explain what it feels like to have a whole human being living inside of your body and growing inside of your body, that you can feel move and kick, and you can feel their hiccups inside of you. It's a crazy experience. And once you deliver that baby, it is a big change. It's a big change for that child and for you. um, and so just the idea that we can bounce back just like that and just go back to work and, you know, leave our babies there is not realistic. Is not realistic at all. So, yes. Another question. So this is also just like a natural water birth. Um, what do you mean? What's also like a natural water birth? I'm not sure. I don't know when you asked that question or what exactly I was saying while you asked that. But please clarify and let me know, so that I can answer that question for you. But yes, and there was something else that I wanted to say. I don't even remember. I got off on a tangent. But but yes, like I said, if there's anything else that you all want to add, for some of you ladies who have gone through, you know, childbirth and what your experience was, I definitely would like to know, because this is an open discussion, and I do want for you all to have some of your input. So be sure to use the live chat section, to ask your questions for more clarification if I missed anything, or just to share, you know, part of your story. But ultimately, yes, I wanted to do this video just to kind of shed a little light on our birthing experience, why we wanted to do a natural water birth, why we wanted to do the lotus birth. And I know a lot of people had, excuse me, had been following us, and we had posted a lot about it, as we went through the process. And then once we had our child, we kind of didn't talk about it after that. And I remember someone had asked me on my page, they're like, hey, weren't you all gonna do a water birth or whatever? But our plans definitely changed once, you know, once our daughter was born, because she was 8 weeks early. So it did shift. But for those of you who are just now tuning in, you can go back, you can catch the beginning of this video. It will be posted to our YouTube channel, Inner Thought TV. Make sure you subscribe so that way you can receive the notifications when we do go live, when we have more videos. You can tune into our live stream meditations and every Thursday, because we are going to continue to do our Women of the Womb Sister Circle and cover certain topics like this. As I learn, I'll continue to share with you all. And if there are any specific topics that you would like for us to discuss for next week or going forward, make sure you leave it in the live chat or post it in the comment section once the video is posted to YouTube. But that was all that I had for this evening. Like I said, if you were just now tuning in, you're catching the end of this, you can go back. It'll be posted up on our YouTube channel, Inner Thought TV, in just a few moments. But that is all I have for this evening. If there's anything I left out, any other questions you have, you can always send me a DM on Instagram, ask them on here in the comments section. My Instagram is Women of the Womb. For those of you who don't know, make sure to go follow me. And peace. That's all I have. Yes. Thank you all for joining the discussion. And you are so welcome. All right. Much love.